Welcome back to Deep Thoughts Radio, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a heck of an effort to get these things recorded due to logistics of weather, mainly. Even if I had my old place, it would have been tough to record due to wind and rain and everything just being really super cold. Plus, always busy with new projects. So I'm at my buddy's lounge here where I smoke all the time. He was generous enough to let me have the key. So they had this hearing on UFOs, man. Oh boy, what a catastrophe that was. So, I hear about this hearing and us, like, we're not going to get all excited because we suspect it's going to be a bunch of bullshit, right? A bunch of flowery talk about things or minimizing things. But this even blew everyone else's mind. I mean, even the most optimistic people about what was going to be shared were just with their jaws on the ground because they said nothing. And so one of the better analyses I saw of the hearing, because I missed the live broadcast of it, which probably would have put me to sleep, was a video with Dr. Stephen Greer. Yeah, before we jump into it, it's probably good to talk about sort of my stance on maybe Greer, the movement in general, because, I'll give a lot of movements crap because I want more out of them, like Bigfoot. Show me a body, show me a body because there's supposed to be tens of thousands of these things out there and they have to have a certain amount, otherwise they go extinct. But they're all over the world, supposedly, which means there's got to be several thousand in one area, several thousand in the other. It gets to 10,000 really quick. Some being would have naturally died, and you would have found their remains, right? Just rotting somewhere. It loses a battle with the grizzly bear, which I guarantee it would. As much as you think, oh man, these things are like 10 feet tall. Look at a bear on its hind legs, man. It'll rip you to shreds. So they've changed the narrative to be interdimensional beings and stuff because we get smarter. But UFOs, I'm utterly convinced that we have been visited. We'll get into all that too. A little bit of regurgitation for folks that have seen every single episode on this kind of subject matter. I'm going to share an interesting Area 51 story, which I believe I've shared once before. Tangible evidence from friends of mine who saw something take off from 51, and they were like, oh, these aren't necessarily extraterrestrial. Could be man-made. Could be derived from extraterrestrial technology, which there's a lot of evidence of that now too. But okay, so Stephen Greer. If you haven't seen this guy, he was apparently an ER surgeon, whatever, the triaging done in ERs. He said, more recently, he said that he had a encounter when he was like, I think 17 or something like that. If he ever said that before, I missed it. So I think it's interesting that someone's evolution starts. When I first started making episodes, I told you about the gray that told me what was in my Christmas present right from the very beginning. I'm not going to invent that at a later time because, oh gosh, I don't have a story. Let me make up one, and that kind of thing. Not saying he's lying. I'm just saying it's kind of peculiar that wouldn't have been something he said in 2001 or 2000 when he had his big summit with everyone from the military that apparently has either personally been involved with sightings and other events after sightings, or at least were on projects that were covert and that sort of thing. Now, he spoke recently in the last year with a friend of mine. I think it was more like October, November last year, for several hours. And so I'm kind of excited. I'm like, I'm nobody on this show, of course, because we're so fucking shadow banned, it's crazy, but I said, do you think I can get a call with him? Just whatever time he's got. The reply I got, I think, was very sensible, and it said, well, he doesn't seem to be that interested in anything unless it builds his brand. Now, that's my friend's observation, although it seems that is typically how it's done, right? I was just talking to a friend before I started the show, and it's like, I've tried to make me the most insignificant being in this show. The information is what you come for. You don't come from me. You might think I'm cool or whatever. Doesn't matter. I don't want to be Anderson Cooper. I don't want to be Tucker Carlson. You got too much fucking personality news out there, don't you? You don't need to worship somebody else. This ain't the Alex Jones show, right? It's not the me show. It's the us show. It's our information. I'm doing my best to, sift the information, correlate it, connect it. So, I don't have any interest in doing that kind of stuff. So if that's truly his objective, I kind of get he's got to pay the bills, but it's good to reach out to some of the nobodies every once in a while because you never know. And if you're dealing with truth is the most important thing. That's what this show is trying to put out. Okay. I'm right and I'm wrong sometimes, right? But the truth is the most important thing. I would never have made a movie, and I'm not saying it recently happened, but there have been movies out there with great truths in it, and the people want to monetize it so badly that no one ever sees the film. Now, it was an incredible movie that released about 2 weeks ago. Yes, you can go see it in the theater. Yes, you could buy a ticket, but you were immediately within 48 hours able to see it online for free because the truth was more important than the monetization. Everyone can donate in any way they want. Just send money to that guy who made it or go see it and buy a ticket. Eat some popcorn at the same time. How ironic. But so I look at the overall message of Greer. He does a lot of repeating. He does a lot of full sentence answers when you could probably just say yes and no. But he always tries to make sure that you get a foundation for how to sift what he's about to say. And it may be just that maybe Deep Thoughts listeners, we can get it a little quicker because we've already analyzed so many different takes on this kind of stuff. So maybe he understands this audience better than we do. He's obviously got hundreds of thousands of followers and lives off of what he does. Do I trust the guy 100%? It's either one of two ways for me. Either he doesn't realize he's being manipulated by a lot of sources that are close to this material, although he's a very intelligent person. I won't take that away from him. But he never talks about, I might be, getting had. Like Bill Cooper said in the 90s, he thought he'd been had. He saw what he saw in the ocean. These vehicles exiting the ocean and new vehicles going into the ocean. He said that, I will guarantee you to the dying day, that was true. But everything he saw afterwards in these Blue Book operations, he said he might have been, fed information to then feed to the public. Very plausible. I don't hear that from Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer takes people out in the desert and they meditate, and then all of a sudden they see these lights way off in the distance flying around, which today, if you know about drone technology and LED technology, dude, I could give you that show for a few bucks, right? And I'm sure he's charging a little bit of money for the trip. So I'd like to see him say something that he might, be led astray like Bill Cooper had the integrity to say. If the guy is completely on the in, meaning this has all been a setup from the very beginning, it's a very interesting what he ends up talking about. It's, again, if you had someone coming into the room to give you a lethal dose of something, and there's a bunch of other people in the room who supposedly have knowledge about the lethal dose, and they don't speak up, then you're in a very isolated situation, and you'll rebel to avoid the dosage, right? But if there's at least someone in the room representing you, go, hey, don't do that to him or her. Don't do that. Oh, gosh, we tried. And then you get the shot. You're going to feel a little bit better. It's crazy. It's how it works, right? Control opposition allows you to have this belief that someone cares about you. The whole Paul family, right? Rand and his father, Ron, right? They're Senate hearing guys. They're people who get in front of the Senate and make you feel like something's going to happen, but they never do dick in the end, right? Opposing a bill that eventually gets passed. That's all control opposition, make you feel like it's okay, right? By the way, it's one of the episodes that when I reposted on the other channel, the YTers knocked it down completely. The good thing is we're starting to see these patterns in their behavior. We're starting to live by results and nothing else. So when someone doesn't produce an end result, we light up the entire track of everyone involved with that scam, and we burn every single one of them in the public. And so these politicians who have been able to live off of rituals of the peasant mind, right? Oh, we'll do that Senate hearing and everyone will feel like they got it right. Like the woman from the IRS that pleaded the fifth like 55 times. She never went to jail. But she fucked a bunch of people over chasing them because they were conservatives. That's how the game's played. Got to set this foundation because that's exactly what happened in this hearing. So Greer is very outwardly upset with the way the hearing went. He essentially drew one major correlation over and over and over again, point by point, and that he has done so many Freedom of Information Act requests and gained so much documentation from the government regarding blue projects that these answers that these guys gave in this Senate hearing were basically perjury and, how do you say it? Either that or they're not briefed, right? Because they always try to live in compartments, or they are completely compartmentalized. He has a new term for briefed, which he goes read in. They're not read in to the movement. So, okay, he invents a new word. That's great. But the weird thing was, these hearings happen. I'm real busy. Someone at the lounge, I believe, said, "Oh, did you hear the hearing?" Well, he basically said they're real. Absolutely not. They absolutely did not say that they were real. They absolutely denied anything about these things being real. But at the same time, contradicted themselves left and right. They also pretended to have the incapability of connecting a computer with a movie to a video device to show the Senate some of the video that they had captured. They ended up showing some wiggly video out a window with no objects flying in those shots. So they botched it on purpose. But you got IT guys all over the Senate. Trust me. You show up with a laptop, not only will they copy the fucking thing, but they're going to get it up there on the big Jumbotron in 2 seconds. No problem. What is it now? A little command key to simulcast and mirror the computer monitor that you have in your laptop? It's 2 seconds. Mac or Windows. It's no problem anymore. Oh, they just couldn't figure out how to do it. But then another deeper conspiracy hatches in the middle of the first half of this hearing, which is some scumbag in there going, well, you know, what happens with these conspiracy theorists who post false information about UFOs or UAPs, and they cause a stir in the national security envelope, right? This game of calling everything they want to hide national security is so ancient and so old. Again, I'll repeat this every time I mention this from now on. There was an episode, I think in 1987-88, of Star Trek Next Generation where Picard was being told that something was national security. And he read this old poem or something that someone had written. I don't even know what he was referencing, but it was a different way of saying the same exact thing, that you're hiding within this bullshit tactic of saying things are top secret. So you lie to your people by saying it's too secret to tell you. You know, are we created equal people? You know? And hey, sometimes you just gotta rip the Band-Aid off and get stuff out there. Now, when they first started talking about this hearing from the observational standpoint of Stephen Greer and this other gentleman whose name escapes me, I don't know who he is, they said, oh, it's going to be one of multiple hearings, and that potentially this is going to be, the bleeding of the information out to the public. But they just truncated themselves with this first hearing such that they would have to contradict themselves to reveal anything new. Or they'd have to bring in a whole other team of people that announce themselves as having the real information that the other two guys that did the hearing that's already happened were not informed about these other areas. So the bad thing that happened is that they're trying to create this, obviously, administration of disinformation, right? Straight out of 1984, man. And so they're saying anybody who puts information out there, this senator asked, well, has anyone had any legal ramifications for lying about UFOs? Oh, now you can't say anything about UFOs existing, or you saw one, or they did this and that. Because then they can come to your house, knock on your door, and put you in jail. Just like the people that are still being held without due process, unconstitutionally, and everyone's just sitting on their hands. Unbelievable. You can only hope those are the bad guys. But we know some of them aren't, right? So they right out said that they don't have a single piece of material physical or otherwise, from an extraterrestrial source, meaning even a piece of algae, a rock, a piece of metal, a piece of plastic, a wire. They flat out deny that they have any recovered piece of debris from a UFO. We'll get to Roswell again, because we got to go through that to prove that this isn't the case. But again, Dr. Greer is sitting there going, look, I got reports from the government that completely negates this statement, which makes the guys up there perjuring people in front of the Senate, which got crime attached to it, right? Of course, we're all going to breathe deeply while we wait for them to get arrested if they're in fact lying. And you can read it on their face, right? So if you know what a liar looks like, you just read it on their face. You can see where they're bullshitting and where they're like looking at the center like, don't ask me in a certain way that I have to say yes. You're getting close to like being in trouble with somebody you don't know. So there's a little bit of that. Then they said, then they had to admit, this gimbal and this Tic Tac thing, which are, I guarantee you, technically naval vehicles. It technically could be Air Force, probably wouldn't be Space Force because there's a jurisdiction issue with that. But these vehicles are designed somewhere in the world. It used to be Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where Skunk Works was invented. That these things with the almost state-of-the-art stuff is put on a blueprint. Then it's manufactured, and then it's tested at Area 51. Now, whether or not 51 has a deep concentration in UFOs inside warehouses, well, Bob Lazar even said that that's not 51, that's S4, which is a mountainside that basically opens up and lets people in. Which, technically, to split a hair, they're never going to open the mountain to let somebody in. They're going to open a door. They're going to open up a little pipe hole and you're going to crawl in or whatever. You'd only open up the mountainside if you're going to fly a vehicle. That'd be the only reason why you would expose yourself. And hopefully that would only happen at night if it was a real program, right? So they tend to, they were trying to categorize the flying vehicles and said, look, well, there's some vehicles that we have observed that have flight characteristics that do not match anything that we actually have above ground, right? But the Tic Tac and the gimbal are definitely our creations. The military flies them over water, so if they go dead, they fall in the drink. Very little damage, depending on how fast they're moving, and they can pick them up and take them home. Don't forget the disc that was recovered off of the coast of Guam. Stephen Greer interviewed this kid who did not seem like a brilliant thespian who would be able to persuade anyone one way or the other. He could have rehearsed his story, but he seemed like he was sweating bullets giving out this interview, which could be a sign that he is lying and he feels nervous, and we're interpreting it as a integrity element of his character. Don't know. Either way, I tended to believe the guy, but it matched the same story as a naval vehicle that crashed, and when he was debriefed the next morning, he was told by an admiral, according to him, that it indeed was a covert naval vehicle that had lost its power and landed in the water. And because it's buoyant, because it has air in it, apparently, and it got caught up in a net of a fishing boat. And he was in the boat that went out to rescue it, and he was a crane operator. So only 2 guys were allowed to be above deck, and the 4 dudes in black operated the operation, basically. Wrapped it up in a bunch of ladder nets, and they pulled it onto the ship. Apparently it weighed so much that the ship leaned over to a drastic amount, and this ship was designed to service sea buoys, and so it's used to picking up very heavy objects from the water. And he said this thing must have been 2 or 3 times our maximum because the boat nearly capsized. So it seems strange that these sort of rookie ships are the ones that are commandeered to go get this stuff. It seems strange that they would scramble an entire force of sailors to go out on a ship when they only want 2 of the sailors to stay above board. Why would you even let the others get on the ship? To say, read the roster. Who's in command of this position, that position? Okay, we got a skeleton crew. We're going to go out and grab this thing. Nope. They would scramble to go get it, full detail on the ship, and they drag this thing out. It's like some crazy, giant, dark, purplish black disc, of which when he knocked on it, it sounded hollow. He said it had no scratches on it whatsoever. Everybody else was kept below deck. He said the men in black covered up the windows downstairs so no one could see outside during the rescue, which is only one side of the ship. Everyone was kept below deck until they got to the dock. He said, and when he got to the dock, a bunch of commanders, a bunch of like special forces guys waiting, and told everyone to get off the boat when you normally clean up the boat every trip, right? So they were off that night. He was told to report the next day with the other guy, and they were told it was a military vehicle. Which at first I was like, oh, no way, it's a UFO. And it very well could be, but once I saw the Tic Tac and the gimbal and I started thinking about this, and then there's some other, UAP thing that's flying over a naval base over on the East Coast, I thought, why is it always over our bases, right? Oh, right, because that's where it's going to park at night. And that's where you get to control the eyeballs that look up. The other weird one is like every soldier has a phone. Every soldier has a phone with a camera. And so you got this thing flying over a naval base like Virginia or something. You're going to be able to just bring out your phone and go, oh my God, look at this, right? And as much as the military be like, hey, you give me that phone, they'll get a video out, trust me. So I think these are all very controlled experiments. Now, let's go off to Area 51 for a split second. There was a recent movie filmed in Area 51, which won't release until May 27th, I think, or 25th. And when you see the movie, you're going to know what I'm talking about. But while the film crew was there, they launched a vehicle off to the side. And the crew was watching all the locals run around the corner, all the soldiers run around the corner. And so a couple of them went around the corner and they looked at the end of the runway and they said there was like a disc-shaped object at the end of the runway. And it just went poof up into the sky. It just vanished like that. And so they're looking at each other like, oh my God, am I going to get killed? Like, were we supposed to see that? Why are you launching that while we're filming a movie here? They're all okay. But he said that the crew locally was jumping up and down like little boys and girls. Just, yahoo, yahoo. So you have to read into the state of mind of these experts who fly vehicles, and that the fact that that vehicle took off the way that it did was a celebratory thing. Meaning there was a likelihood, a fair percentage, probably deep double-digit percentage, the thing wasn't going to go anywhere. And so when it did, it was hoorah. So when I heard that story from 1 degree away from the source, I was convinced. It all clicked with me what the Tic Tac and the gimbal were. So the other one is that you have this, what is it? It's either 2004 or 14. I think it's 14. The one that was off the coast of San Diego where the Tic Tac's flying around. And you have two pilots that go on a little tour. I saw an Australian 60 Minutes where they interviewed the two Top Gun pilots that saw it. There's more pilots that chased it, but these two have been allowed to talk. There's an old white guy and then this very beautiful woman who was one of the Top Gun pilots. During the interview, he is just happy as can be to be there. No worries. He's just like, ha, 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 this is great. I'm making some money off seeing this thing. And the woman looked utterly terrified during the questioning. And she kept looking at the guy like, am I supposed to say yes or no? And that guy was just not even looking at her, man. He was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, oh, yeah, uh-huh. And the idea is that that behavior could be explained very easily by saying he's debriefed, she's not. He knows it's a naval vehicle, she doesn't. And so she's very raw and real. And he's like, he's been, you can talk about this, you can talk about that, There's even questions during the 60-minute interview where she's kind of looking at him like, are we allowed to say anything, So it occurred to these gentlemen doing this review of the Senate hearing that they're going to try to use the UFO as yet another reason why we need more censorship and more financial penalties for saying things in the real world. I mean, what a dream, right? What a dream. You got some medical treatment that's being thrown at you that you don't need, and if you so much as say, I don't want it, and here's the reason why, your reason why could put you in jail. So they could just scoop everybody up who resists, and everyone else gets pushed in, and then while you're being held the pokey, you get the poke, and you're done. And you're going to get the bad one because they want you off the face of the planet because you're resistance to Klaus Schwab, right? But my journey with UFOs is very classic up to a point. But by the late 2010s, probably about 2007, 8, something clicked in my head where I think I had it wrong. But I wrote an article online about this is just the very best disinfo campaign for two reasons. It scares your citizens and it scares your enemies. Now remember, the USA is supposedly the only country in the whole world announced officially that have UFOs. We're always the recipients of these UFOs. Well, where's Russia's UFOs? I mean, I haven't even heard any rumors that they have UFOs. What about all the other countries in the world? They're always over South America. You mean to tell me none of them have crashed and none of them get to keep the goods? The U.S. soldiers show up and take it away from them? Now, there's a story about non-U.S. soldiers that are of American descent showing up in weird black anti-gravity vehicles, chasing away a bunch of Peruvian American soldiers who went down to a crash in the side of a mountain. They said it was a teardrop-shaped vehicle. It slammed into the mountain. It was oozing some chemicals. They get on it, and they feel like, oh my God, whoever's in this is dead. And then they said, just as soon as we had that thought, we got this ambient thought from the center of the vehicle that they're in there and they're okay. Don't worry. And they felt very comfortable. No sooner than they get that little programming, these vehicles show up, land. They're black with black-suited guys. No identification of country. But they spoke English, they looked American, they spoke with American accents. Really weird, like they were chasing this thing. Now the weird thing was it took this crew from Peru, wherever the station was, to go to find this thing down this valley. He said it took about an hour just to get down to the vehicle because it wasn't a roaded area, right? But he said he was stabbed in the chest with an M16 for 12 to 14 hours, being told that he didn't see it, which corroborates my personal friends who grew up in Groom Lake, who were harassed by the camo guys in the middle of the night. This is starting from the 50s up. And she said, a friend of mine, she grew up there as a child on that land, the family that owned Groom Lake. And she said, we'd wake up and the whole house was crawling with these assholes with these machine guns, and they're poking all the adults and the children in the chest with machine guns, trying to scare them away. But they never moved. But of course, during Obama's administration, they seized the land for $4 million, eminent domain, when its minimum value was well into the tens of millions of dollars because there's copper on that land, which is used for ammunition and a bunch of other stuff. But the commandos got in and blew up the mine, so they couldn't make any money from it. So they'd have to borrow money to dig it out, but now they know the government's against them, so borrowing money to dig it out and having commandos blow it up again wasn't going to be financially feasible. They just keep going in debt without any return. So I'm doing this show, first season. I think it was first season. And I go after the Roswell crash. Maybe the second season. And I'm like, I'm literally, this is the classic story, man. I go out to destroy the theory of Roswell, to expose it completely. Because I'd seen some videos that talked about some of the, misconceptions of what it was. And by the time I was done, because I did it with a really extreme discipline, I'll make this quick for the listeners who've already heard me tell this story. I said, look, I'm only going to listen to testimony from people who never really sold anything. They didn't have gas stations with aliens on it. They never sold any major books or anything like that. Little more coffee table books and not factual books. But I was able to see the interviews, and a bunch of these have been pulled off the internet. Interviews with the mortuary guy who had caskets taken from him, who then went down and visited his friend, the nurse at the local military hospital, who said, you better get out of here. Something intense is going on. I'll tell you later. And she told him at 2 breakfasts exactly what had happened, that there were aliens, that she was in the middle of an autopsy. She was puking her guts out because their bodies are full of sulfur. So when you cut them open, you get a big face of sulfur. And it was making everyone nauseous. Her and 2 other physicians. She's a nurse, 2 physicians. The story about the receptionist who was later murdered because she was taken down the hallway and allowed to see it through the door jamb. And then she went home and excitedly told her husband and kids, who then went to school, and then they visited her and said, you better shut up and undo what you did. She ends up dying in a hotel room, registered to her sister with the exact same death as Marilyn Monroe, and Dorothy Kilgallen, right? So drinking and taking a bunch of drugs. Had none of that in her background. Her best friend was interviewed in her, I would say, 80s, and she was sobbing a little bit, and she says, I think they killed her. The interviews with the gentleman who ran the bridge game, that Marcel, the major military guy that picked up the debris and met the alien that was still alive, who came to the bridge game with a box full of debris and a truck full of debris, showed everyone at the bridge game, all weather balloon specialists, okay? That's what they did. They built top secret weather balloon systems to go way up into the atmosphere and detect whether or not nuclear bomb tests were going on in Russia by sensing the minuscule EMP bursts from above ground testing. They knew exactly what they were looking at, and it was not a weather balloon. So that's another little factoid there. An interview with the guy that actually packed everything up that they found onto a cargo jet, flew to, I think, Fort Worth, Texas, where Ramsey's given the line of bullshit to the press about it being a weather balloon, holding a letter that when we zoomed up on it talks about a disc that landed. Marcel's sitting squatting next to him. But the guy that brought the debris was then assigned to doing a little bit of loading at the Air Force Base, because that's what they do when you get off. You always stay busy. And he watched every package he packaged up, which he said was basically weightless, go onto another cargo jet, which was headed straight to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The ship itself most likely would have been taken in the middle of the night on a vehicle to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in some hangar, right, to be reverse engineered of some sort. Now, according to Dr. Stephen Greer, he's got a really sci-fi story of why the Roswell ended up crashing. That we hit it with a radar that was so powerful that two vehicles slammed into each other, and apparently one got away. I've never heard that repeated by anyone else. Seems highly unlikely. The other one is Marcel himself. He refused to write a book until 1979. So hardly an opportunist. He actually went out into the desert, I think the late 80s. He barely had any teeth in his head. And he took him right to where he thought it was, and he recalled the whole experience of being with the alien. And he talks about how it was super sad, and it was not speaking, but it was communicating with him. He said essentially if you're in the vicinity of one of these beings, you can hear what they're thinking. And he said that it said essentially, I have come to full grip that I'm here and I'm never going home. And then he said that when he had a reaction to it, he was feeling sad that the being realized it, turned to him and said, oh, and don't worry, no one's coming to pick us up. And he's like getting teary-eyed telling this story. And the guy's got nothing, man. He's got nothing to tell. I mean, why would you tear up? Why don't you just tell a story? And, hey, you said he wasn't going to get picked up. What do you care, right? If you're telling a lie. No, man, this guy's eyes go full glass, and he is just staring in the distance going, I saw something amazing that I'm never going to see again. This poor guy was stuck here. Marcel's son turns into a physician. He wrote a book in 2017. He was the one that got to see the debris when he was a kid. And he said, oh, yeah. He goes, the stuff was real. He goes, but contrary to popular belief, he goes, I did not, test the memory metal. We didn't shoot it with the gun. We didn't do anything to it. I was just looking at two different types of plastics, two different types of metals. There were these purple metal I-beams with writing on them. My father told me I'd never see it again. And there's rumors that he kept pieces of it. I'm sure he did. But he said that every year someone calls him on the phone and harasses him from the military, trying to convince him that what he saw was not what he saw. Trying to tell him that the I-beam with the writing on it was part of some toy tape out of New York City that the Roswell people used to build weather balloons. And he's like, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. He said he had him send them a copy of the tape, and he goes, it doesn't even look anything like what my father transcribed on paper. They'll tell you that the mortuary guy changes his story over and over after over 40 years. Well, I watched every interview I could find of the guy, which is probably a good 3 or 4 hours combined. I never heard him change a single line of his story. Plus the two groups that found the crash in the first place. A father, his brother, and their 2 sons, cousins. One of them was 8 years old. I know that's very young, but his story about what he saw it was such a detailed story that it had child elements to it, where he basically said that when they came upon the crash, you have a fully alive one that's not injured, one that's looks like it's dying, and one that's just hamburger. And that he had laid out these little mats for each one of them, including himself, so 3 mats on the ground. He said as soon as they saw it, the dude, that it sat down. And so he said the 8-year-old, I mean, this is just the integrity of the story is tremendous. He said he went over and he thought it was a toy. And so he sat down next to it and put his hand on the alien's thigh, and it jumped, which freaked him out because he's like, oh my God, this thing is alive and real. And so he runs behind his father and grabs a leg, looks through the legs just like a little kid would. He said his cousin was crawling all around the vehicle, but no sooner than they meet this alien, they're trying to speak a couple of different languages to it. Of course, it doesn't speak French. And an archaeologist shows up with his students. He speaks 7 languages. He's trying to do the same thing. And then boom, here comes a Jeep, a redhead guy and a black guy. Black dude was totally cool. Redhead guy was a total asshole and started cussing and yelling at him and trying to put him in shock treatment, saying, what the hell are you doing here? Get in my vehicle. And then they take them north, of which the archaeologist is like, my car is south of here. I got students. I cannot be going north. If you want me to leave, that's fine. I'll just go south and get my car and we'll go home. But we saw this thing crash last night. That's why I brought my students out. I thought it was going to be a meteorite. And oh my God, it's a freaking flying saucer, right? But you've heard me beat up several times on different episodes the notion that we got a lot of technology off these beings. And then I've recently, in the last year, saw an interview, which probably wasn't recent, but it was this old farmer guy who used to be an engineer on the back engineering project, according to him. He could give 2 Fs whether or not he's being interviewed. That's the cool thing. He's not polished. He doesn't have all these, well, then this happened, and then that happened. I got my script that I'm telling you. He's just answering questions. But he solved for me one of the biggest issues, and Bob Lazar actually helps too. Bob Lazar says that these ships run in a crystal 215. Crystal is actually sliced and diced in a certain way that the pole around the crystal is actually naturally emitting a tremendous frequency, which then can be routed in these arches in the inside of the ship down to antimatter engines. He said there was a 3-engine configuration and a 4-engine configuration. And because the vehicle runs on an electromagnetic wave that is obviously at monstrous levels of movement, that it's creating gravity wells around the vehicle, and once you do that, the vehicle falls into the hole of the absence of any pushing pressure on the outside, which is an ether-based theory, not the phenomenon-based theory, and that's how it flies around. So when I heard about fiber optics, being discovered from Roswell, I was like, yeah, whatever. Extruded glass has fascinated man from the very beginning. You don't have to have anything but a piece of glass out of a lightning bolt in the desert. You pull out a strand of that, you hit it with a candle on one side, and boom, you see the light go out the other side. So man has always extruded whatever material we can get a hold of through holes, right? We do it with Play-Doh, we do it with steel, we do it with plastic. So you put glass through, you realize it transmits the light through it. And there's all kinds of wild tech now with fiber optics to make sure it can turn corners and get amplified and stuff. It's utterly brilliant. But this dude said, look, if the vehicle's running on 100% electromagnetic energy, you don't want to have components in your UFO that rely on electromagnetic energy to talk to each other, because you're going to mess up the entire equation of the outer part of the ship. Because it gets amplified, right? So a little bit here, it gets amplified up on those arches, and it can screw up the balance of the antimatter engines down below. So they use light in a fiber optic. Makes complete sense. There's no electrons, it's all photons, right? Minuscule waves of ethereal pushing. But he said there's one characteristical difference, if that's a word, that this fiber optic that they found inside the vehicle, one in which they thought was spaghetti for about 10 years, it actually lights itself. So the energy that creates the light is inside the fiber, and the only thing they're doing is blocking it as opposed to inserting it like we do. They said night vision came from Roswell. And first I'm like, okay, give me a break. Like what? Well, they got big eyes, so what's the deal, right? Why would they need to put something else on their head to see night vision? Well, it's not that at all. This farmer guy says, look, man, he goes, it's their eye socket. He goes, once we recovered one of their dead bodies and we took one of their lenses on their eyes and we just looked through it, at night. He goes, we could see basically what we see in infrared today. It's a little bit different, of course, because it's an organic material. But he said this stuff just naturally did it. And he goes, that kicked off the theory that then developed into our electronic components to actually pull that off in a completely different way. Aha, that made sense. So the other thing, back on the Senate hearing itself, was that they were talking about the sightings in England on the American base and British bases. Talked about the fact that it's a very well documented event that these vehicles were flying over missile sites. And I detailed this like crazy in a previous episode, so I won't go all the way into it. But essentially, they had, a vehicle that hovers in front of the base. A bunch of soldiers go out and get preoccupied while back gates had breaches in them, and it looked like somehow a life force went through the back, went down into the missile silos and deactivated who knows exactly what component, but like they said it was a navigation system in each one of the missiles, which then made them turn off automatically because they weren't passing their automatic check every few seconds, right? But that was mentioned by one of the senators, and the guy was just looking at him like he was a conspiracy theorist. These are all over the Discovery Channel, all over the Sci-Fi Channel. So when it comes to spreading disinformation, what the hell are you talking about? It's been on TV for 40 years. History's Mysteries and all these other shows that have been talking about it forever. You're going to put everybody in jail? It's suddenly a crime, right? But when you hear stories from people that really saw things happen, I don't care what it is, non-UFO things. I've had this happen in my lifetime so many times, it disgusts me that I will either be at a meeting that talked about some pretty intense things with the people who are actually doing it, and then I'll share it with a friend later on, and they'll say, "Oh, that's bullshit. I don't believe that." And I'm just like, I was there, dude. I'm telling you, I was there when that happened. Yeah, I don't want to believe that right now, so I'm not going to believe that, right? So you get a Bill Cooper kind of guy who's a man's man. He's just one example. But when they really see something, you can't convince them that it didn't happen. The people have had near-death experiences and gone to the other side and saw something completely three-dimensional, not some chemical dump in the brain where they see a few kaleidoscope lights. But no, they go somewhere. They talk to people, and then they're told to come home. It's not their time yet. And everyone has the same story. Not your time yet. People don't know each other. People who are children to adults. Atheists who have this experience are suddenly not atheists anymore. They may not be organized religion after that, but we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have seen things that they won't relinquish. Now, obviously, there are tales of one of the stupidest tales is Venus always gets thrown out there as the excuse why you saw something in the sky. Meanwhile, what they saw in the sky was like flying around and flying off. It wasn't Venus in the sky, but of course they'll send you that stupid thing. Oh yeah, I guess it was Venus. I sure flew like a ladybug, like a lightning bug, excuse me. So I came out of this Roswell experiment, did the episode right after I had all the detailed information, and then continued to follow it. And, I can't find anything but corroborating evidence that keeps making it more and more believable. But I was at the lounge here the other day, and I was at this local restaurant, and I had a buddy of mine just ask me, he goes, "Well, what do you think about, Bob Lazar?" He called him Lazar. It's pretty funny. He said, "Bob Lazar." And I said, well, again, my take on him is that I don't necessarily believe that he went to two different universities and never bought a jersey, never bought a t-shirt. Because you're there for a couple of years. I don't care how fucking smart you are, getting an extra degree in physics at Caltech or MIT, you're going to be there for a couple of years. Your family's going to know you were there for 2 years. Your friends are going to know. You're going to have friends at that location. No matter how much of a hermit you are, you're going to be like, oh, I used to always go to this coffee shop. You have classmates that you can't ignore, that you're going, and especially if you're a prodigy in the college. I mean, there's a lot of prodigies in those two schools, but someone's going to remember you. So, oh yeah, I know him. You don't have to prove anything. The government doesn't have to erase your past. But I would say that because so much of what Bob talks about is it correlates with a lot of the other eyewitnesses and people that are involved, like this dude who worked on the ships. This old man I was talking about, I mean, he was so matter of fact about it. He talked about how the aliens actually do speak. He says, we had 4 of them in the facility we were in. Only 1 actually talks, but he goes back and talks to his buddies, and then he comes back to us. He used to call them parrots because he said every time we'd ask him a question about how a component worked, he'd just repeat words back to us. And eventually they'd figure something out. But he said simple things like the reason why the vehicle stays level in the room is that there's basically a plumb bob inside. He goes, it's a hook. It goes down, and if it leans left or right, the ship uses that thing to figure out how to balance itself. He goes, where it was simple, they kept it simple. Where it needed to be complex, it was complex. Well, who's going to tell that story? If you're really talking about a UFO and you're making it all up, oh my God, how many sci-fi books are you going to read, right? But Lazar's explanation of the Element 215, which was horribly dramatized, I think the Netflix show that came out, where they have this like goofy ass producer who's now become like a personality in the UFO industry. The producer director lies his ass off during this documentary, saying that 215 has never been created. I just got off the phone with 13 physicists and they said this has never been made. You just go look it up online. It was published, I think, in 2003 that they actually makes 14 and 16 and made 15. It was very expensive, and it wasn't like in any mass quantity to build this crystal tower that he was talking about, that Lazar was talking about. But it's absolutely not the truth. But it's lying to your face to make something seem more intense in a documentary. Oh, what's the code of a documentary? Oh yeah, put a bunch of lies in it, right? And demand that you believe it as truth. But now what's interesting is that Stephen Greer has been very cautious to the public and cautioning us about this fake alien invasion story. So here's what's very interesting about those of us who think that they might be trying to do what supposedly von Braun told his assistant, that they were already planning an alien invasion. Reagan gets up and does that weird speech and talks about what if there was an alien invasion, we'd all come together under a new world order kind of thing, although he didn't use the NWO phrase. That's basically what he was saying. I think Reagan's heart was in the right place. I think once you have a guy like Reagan, you can manipulate him until the point he goes crazy up in the, Topanga Canyon Hills, right? But Stephen Greer's been saying, look, they're preparing the narrative for this invasion. Now, this was like a couple of years ago. He even did like emergency, what's this one thing he loves to do? He does like these emergency broadcasts on YouTube, and usually it has a money opportunity, Well, buy my books, buy my books. But he does have a lot of stuff up there for free, so I love that part of it too. He makes compelling movies, so, I'm not trying to take a crap on the dude. It's just I'm watching him really closely, okay? I don't want you to think I've been smitten. But now, what does the Senate hearing do to any theory that they're going to try an alien invasion story? Well, let's think about it. You do a Senate hearing which basically denies absolute all of the molecules that could possibly feed into the story that we have ever retrieved any alien craft of any kind, extraterrestrial. I mean, let's think about extraterrestrial for 2 seconds. You have the theory that there's other planets and that these things are flying through space, always in the third dimension and arriving, just like a normal vehicle would in a sci-fi show like Star Trek. Or you have an interdimensional vehicle which is traveling for a different plane of existence, which is Stephen Greer's current theory. He talked about, I think, a neutronian radar system, detection system that was supposedly disclosed in the 50s through this gentleman's, well, he said he met the guy that invented it, but that this thing was actually looking out into space and sensing this temporal / dimensional shift into our dimension, and that's how they were tracking all the aliens. Well, okay, maybe, right? But I'm going to throw another one out there. If we are on a disk, or we're in a disk container of some sort, and there's more world out there, potentially a planet that's 100 times bigger than the one we think we're on, then these beings coming in from the outside to check out their experiment, like the game Spores that William Wright created, where in the game you're building a little world on an island, and these UFOs would fly by in the game every once in a while, and those were the system administrators from the MMO looking at what you were doing, and they'd fly off. I experienced that one time. I got in early, though. So those could also be extraterrestrial to us. They're not part of our terrestrial plane, but they're on the other side of an ice barrier or whatever, and they're coming in to visit. Remember, the Babylonians talked about their societies being reset every 200 or 300 years when the local government got so corrupt that the experiment within our container, let's just use that metaphor, was going to just fizzle out. Man was going to get destroyed. We were on a path of total destruction. Well, I don't think that we could argue that that's the path we're on now. The entire fucking planet's gone absolutely crazy with these sons of bitches walking out there like a Klaus Schwab guy, walking out there and saying, hey, it's me. I'm going to destroy your entire life. I am personally going to be responsible for wiping 99.9% of you off the planet. And I feel so confident that no one can grab me and no one can take me away. I'm going to show up every day in a new place. I'll be the head. Never heard my name before 2 years ago, but now I'm going to be running Davos, right? I mean, the guy's been around longer, but you know they're making the moves. So at one point, the experiment that is our world, whether it be 100% just God and us, or some medium, or some medium in between, we're looking at complete destruction of what's going on with nutbags got to re-engineer the world in the future. I mean, complete fucking nutbags, right? But we've got other theories, right? We've got other theories about the United States government signing a treaty in like somewhere like 54. And by the way, I misquoted. If this last video I saw was true, then a bunch of people who talked about the Treaty of the South Pole all had the date wrong, and they said 54 when it was 59. So I want to recorrect your brain if you haven't heard that update. But anyway, supposedly we signed this deal with these aliens in 54, and it's the exchange program back and forth. And a lot of the human trafficking is to feed them a bunch of bodies and underground dumps, and you know, all grays are demons, of course. I want to give you a real life example of why I think that calling everything that is alien to us, pardon the pun, is a demon. When, I forget the archaeologist's name, but it was like around 1910-ish. This archaeologist was eating lunch on top of a pyramid. And he noticed that every time he touched the silverware up there, that it actually sparked. And so this kept happening and happening. And he's thinking, man, what's going on here? There's a bunch of electricity up here. So he quickly creates a Baghdad battery with a half-drink bottle of wine, takes a loincloth, puts it on there, pushes a fork in it, lifts it over his head really high, and a huge spark came off the fork and hit one of his workers and knocked him down a couple steps of the pyramid. And they lynched him on top of the pyramid until he was able to calm them down and explain what happened. For a second there, he was a Salem Lot witch, right? In their eyes, he was a demon all of a sudden because he did something they couldn't understand. I mean, raise your hand if you think that an alien culture could get here from any other location other than our plane of existence and not have the capability of destroying us automatically. If they wanted slaves, boom, we're all slaves. If they want to dissect human bodies, they can dissect every human body in the world. How many of you think they would have all this capability and all this power and all this evil in their heart, or benign thought process, reptilian brain kind of theory of like, I cut you because I want to look inside you. What's the big deal, right? And that they wouldn't just do it. And forget the consequences. Who cares? Not me. I think they would. If they have that intent, it ain't going to be nothing but a shit show. Now, that also goes back to my own experience where, you know, I've told this story. I'll tell it super quick for the new people. It's Christmas Eve-ish. Well, it's not Christmas Eve, but it's really close to Christmas. And my girlfriend and I are reading Ridley Strieber's book, Communion, to each other, which when I saw the book cover, I had this really amazing epiphany that I was like, oh my God, someone finally drew what they really look like. Why did I have that feeling? I don't know. But every time I'd see like a big bulbous head alien, it used to piss me off as a child. I remember sitting in the country, 7 years old. My dad's watching Star Trek, and they had the bulbous head episode, and I told my father it's not what they look like. Of course, he's like, ha, ha, ha. And so when I saw the front cover of that book, I got it. We started reading it to each other. And I'm not sure what Willie Strieber's all about, but it started freaking us out. My girlfriend and I were taking paragraph trades, right? Or whatever, pages. I go to bed that night. I wake up on this amplifier. It's a guitar amplifier, and we use that as a Christmas tree. And my girlfriend used to always bring me albums in wrapping paper, so super thin, super square, right? So it's an album. And I don't feel my presence. I don't think that's what I want to experience the next day when they're open. I want to be fully surprised. But I wake up on this amplifier. I'm staring straight at a great alien, and it's like it's something in progress, right? Meanwhile, to my left, over at the table, I'm building a puzzle with my girlfriend. There's like 3 or 4 of them over there moving really fast, looking at the puzzle, and one dude's zipping around the room every few seconds. But this dude in front of me he puts his hand on my shoulder, and you gonna be okay? And I was like, I guess, it was on this shoulder right here. And I remember his little fingertip. I said, but no one's going to believe me. And so he goes, well, what would make them believe you? And I said, I don't know. And he reaches down between my legs and he grabs what I think is an album. And he goes, what if I told you what this was, would they believe you? And I'm thinking in my brain while he's holding it up, it's an album. It's not a big surprise. But then he says it's origami paper. And I'd never seen origami paper. I'm from Kansas. We don't have a lot of that in the classroom. I'm like, ooh, that's weird. But wouldn't it be 8 by 11? Because it's paper, right? Not realizing it's square. All origami paper square, colored on one side, white on the other, as if it's not hard enough to fold that shit and keep all the colors on one side. Next morning, I told my girlfriend without opening it, but I did touch it and it was soft. I'm like, oh my God, this is real, right? So I've been beating that up ever since I last tell you the story. I've been beating it up every day. I tell the story once in a while to friends of mine, and I'm thinking, what was the explanation other than it being real that I would know this, that I would synthesize such an interaction with the being? Because I told you guys in dreams, my dream episodes, that I don't have until recently. I don't have conversations with anybody in dreams. I have like a statement. Maybe they say a statement back and boof, we're off to the next room, and the room I was just in disappears, right? So to have this room hold its shape perfectly, the light was exactly like it is when you wake up with no lights on and you're acclimated a little bit. The volumetric light came in the side room just like a freaking movie, right? And so my interaction with this being, if it's real, he was the most gentle soul and empathetically concerned with my life after I woke up. I think that's fascinating. And again, the story I think I shared in the last year, where I had 2 of them come into my house last year and early this year. And they got on my bed and they were basically speaking English to me, although it didn't seem like they understood what I was saying. I was showing them my tattoo on my arm and I said, this is my friend. And he's looking at me and he doesn't really understand what I'm saying. But he kept saying I was good. You are good. He was kissing my shoulder. It's really strange. I mean, like, who the fuck would think that up? Like, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna think an alien's guy in the room. One dude's down at my legs. I watched their vehicle land outside with light. They went through my screen door, which is big and heavy, and I mean, it's like freaky, right? They were coming down the hallway, and if you missed the episode, I'm thinking, oh God, I'm gonna freak out a little bit if they walk in the room, right? And so I closed my eyes and I put my hand out, this arm out, and I just said, okay. I'm thinking towards them, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. And they're giving me decent feelings too. I just put my hand out thinking, okay, let's just start with a touch, man. Because if I just see you, I'm going to freak out probably, right? As much as I would love to just see them. And I tell you, on my middle finger, this little like nubby finger with like thick skin touches my center finger and just touches it, right? And so then I add a little tension back on my finger. He pushes down even further, and then he crawls up with his fingers. He crawls up my hand till we're kind of holding hands. But he's got little tiny hands. I would assume 4 fingers with the way he grabbed me or touched me. And then I felt the second one started climbing on the end of my bed, and I was almost like just checking out my body or something. And then that one went over my side. It walked around and went behind me. And then I'm laying to my right and it's in there and my shoulder's exposed. And I look over and I see this dude's skull. I see these fibrous hairs that make up the trim of his skull. I mean, it was a little insecty, but it was just a hair. It was just like this line of hairs that were all lined up, and they were translucent, man. I mean, it was like, I don't have dreams like this, right? And I'm staring at this dude, and he's just so happy to be there, you know. But you know, it could be easily, you know, someone could twist it because, oh, that's the devil, man, all over you. It's like, okay, well, it didn't hurt me. They didn't ask me to do anything, you know. I don't know. Just gotta go with the flow, baby. So for the alien invasion, they just canceled the whole thing, right? Unless there's some other weird way they're going to spin this to be like, oh, we know we said it didn't exist, but surprise is here. But Dr. Greer said something really interesting. He said that if anyone listened to this and believed what they said, then what they have done is they have completely reset the slate. For new believers or new considerers, they've completely wiped the slate, saying nothing has ever been found, erasing at least 120 years worth of sightings, 120 years worth of experiences. And that's if you negate some of the stuff in the Bible and some of the stuff drawn all over the world, even in pottery form, you know. But again, if it can be made and made to look old, you have to consider that it was made, you know, cuneiform tablets. There's no way of really carbon dating that stuff. I mean, it's absolutely ingenious language they created with these little slap marks in it. They technically could be fairly new. You never know, right? My grandmother, I'll remind you guys, I'm probably about 20 years old. And my grandmother told me that her and her sister used to watch the floating cigars or flying cigars in the plains of Kansas. She was actually in Erie, Kansas. She said, we used to sit on the hill and just watch them go by. And she said they had a smoke trail out the back, which I don't know what that would be. Someone gave me an excuse why that's not a propulsion. Can't remember what it was. But she said that. I mean, she has never told me anything remotely like that up to that point. She passed away about 5 years later. She never mentioned it again, but she looked at me like she sits like a proper woman, right? As the women of the time used to say, sit on your vagina, not your ass, right? So you sit upright, right? She was just sitting upright, and she looked at me with this face I had never seen her do before or since. It's just like, don't think I'm crazy. And it was almost like, oops, I said this. I wouldn't normally say this, right? So think about it, though. You have a ground-based society. There's no Wright brothers, although my grandmother was born in 1912, but there's not like you don't get on a flight and go places, right? So you're pretty much ground constrained, let's just say. And so these things could fly around. What are you going to do about it? You're just going to make up a story. And geez, the more primitive the culture, what would you use as a mechanism to get another human being to understand what you saw? It's like the story of the shaman seeing the sailors come from Europe. Only the shaman who had an enlightened mind to see things that were probably peyote and that kind of stuff, they could see the ships. They had pointed the ships and tell the locals, here they come, or what is that? And the locals would look and they were like, you know, hosts in Westworld. Doesn't look like anything to me. It wasn't until they stepped out of the boat and a human form became visible that the locals, all of them, went, oh my God, people just popped out of nowhere. Like a time bandit door, because they couldn't see the door, because they don't know what a door was, right? Which is the ship. I think that's fascinating. By the way, you guys who follow Tartaria a lot, and we're going to do another episode on that. There's a theory out there, Magellan never finished his trip, that he actually got caught up in a storm and killed, and that some other dude finished his trip. And the history books actually give it all to Magellan. Which is very interesting. Not sure why that would occur. I mean, what's history care if someone isn't someone until they do something? Like if you'd never done it, if no one had ever crossed the Atlantic before, and you try to, and you die somewhere up there, you have a little heart attack up there, and your co-pilot takes over as the pilot and gets you to the other side. What does history care if it's you and not the other dude, right? Who cares, right? So I don't know why, maybe you guys do know why that story was shifted from, or maintained as Magellan. So my question to myself about this whole thing is, why would the Senate hearing have these two buffoons in there who, let's just say they're not telling the truth. I shouldn't call them buffoons. What if they're telling the truth? Who knows, right? Why would they put such disinformed people in this hearing at the very first hearing of what is supposed to be multiple hearings, which I'm sure they'll be canceled, and just level the playing field? Just say nothing you've ever heard has ever been real. And not decent explanations of things. Like, for instance, the missiles being deactivated is history. Crafts over various forests and over various Air Force bases all around the world, witnessed by dozens of people. We have radio recordings of them reporting it to their central command. I mean, like, some of these things are covered at length. You know, the Roswell crash was in the frickin' newspaper until they yanked it. And then you have to remember, there was a radio station. All the details are in the Roswell episode. But there's a radio station that continued to report this was a real thing. And they yanked the guy's was it FCC license. And he finally got it he sued to get it reinstated, but they yanked his license to broadcast. But that's how untrue it was, right? If someone wants to make an idiot out of themselves, then great. Now, you could probably cite Orson Welles and the H.G. Wells, was it 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast that freaked everyone out in New York, and this was only like 11 years later. So you could say there was mass hysteria, but there was no mass hysteria. Once you wait for there to be an affect, it's going to scare everybody away. Here we have Buck Rogers all throughout the 30s and 40s, right, doing all kinds of episodes about flying in space and spaceships, just getting everyone ready. H.G. Wells got everyone ready. And so, and a few other, very seldomly credited individuals were also talking about this kind of thing as a fictional story. So it becomes real. All right. But the question remains, why would they want to zero everything out? Especially if an alien invasion is on the brink of happening. Seems a little weird. Why not leave some options open, But these well-documented events, what I want to loop back on is, again, like I always say on this show, what if you and I were hired to be these guys in a Senate hearing and dismiss everything? Well, don't you think we would sit around the table and come up with excuses about the most popular events that have ever occurred in the ufology community? Wouldn't we do that? Oh, well, we thought the one over the Air Force Base in England, oh, well, that was actually blah, 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 some covert thing. We think it might have been some vehicle from penetrating neighbors, or we were doing a totally unrelated experiment with defense, and it got misconstrued, etc., etc. And apparently, in the software on your phone, there is an app that can simulate UFOs. I haven't seen it. But Greer talked about it, and I think I reported one that I saw, that I just said I saw. I have no proof, but it's Newport Beach, which is very close to where I am right now. A kid filmed a bunch of little UFO dots lining up and creating a vortex, and actually, the vortex happens and they all spawn out of the vortex. And apparently, that video was created with this software, passed around the world as true, and then they later found out the kid used the software to do it. So I think that's kind of hilarious, right? I guarantee you that the second that you learn how to do computer-generated art and you learn motion tracking, which means you can shake the camera like crazy, but you keep that 3D element in the world attached to some other object. So if you shake the screen, the object you've made shakes with the screen too. Once a student figures out how to do that, it is almost impossible not to try to make a UFO. And, you get the guy that's not so smart, who makes a very three-dimensional one. You can really see the details. And if the kid's really good, knows how to match lighting with the environment, he'll convince you. that it's real. But the other one that's real simple to do are these little points of light. Very, very simple to do. So, got to be careful with those videos that you see passed around. I personally don't know if I've ever seen a video of a UFO that I thought was real, like a real alien UFO. Pictures, the Foo Fighters over LA, that's a little weird. Strings of lights over the Capitol, over Phoenix. I think the one in Phoenix could be, honestly, ball lightning, plasma lightning, because ball lightning shoots out of the center of the Earth in a super fast spinning plasma, which is like, I mean, we're talking multiple times the speed of light spinning. The more it spins, the more it ellipses, and you have a disk, but in the middle of the night, that thing's going to glow like ball lightning. And ball lightning is very, very interesting. My grandfather told me a story about being in Kansas, and I think it was the house that he was in. So the window of the kitchen was open because during tornadoes you want to keep all your windows open so there's no difference in pressure, because your house will get blown apart if you close all your windows, for those of you who don't know, especially in Germany where you're having tornadoes all of a sudden. But he had the window open, and he goes, this ball lightning about the size of a shot put comes in, lands on the sill of the house, of the windowsill, but very quickly bounced into the kitchen right in front of him. You know, he's freaking out. This all happens within a split second. He said it hovered over the teapot, but as soon as it touched the steel of the teapot, it went right back out the window. And if you're thinking about, well, that sounds really intelligent, like it's a vehicle of some sort, some people might think it's a soul or something like that. The idea is there's electromagnetic meridians that you don't see, paths of the way that the electricity is coming into the room, creating basically a railroad track to go right back out. So this thing is riding sort of a quantum locking railroad track to go right back out the door, or out the window, because that's where it's being lured on an electrical level. Remember, lightning goes down to the ground to go back home to the center of the earth. That's why it's there, right? That's why you ground your house, right? So you can be in the rocks. People have seen it several times in history. They're in the middle of hiking in like rocky territories in America. A lot of you have these foundations in your backyard where you live. And if there's any type of shifting of the rock, that these one cracks open and here comes a plume. And if you see it during the day, it's completely mirror. And so it looks like chrome. It's like a mirror. And if it spins, it goes elongate. So the ones over Phoenix that are flying over, could be a whole bunch of stuff, but for me, it looked like on some cyclical pop somewhere nearby, these things were ejecting in the sky, and of course they're just lining up and going with the meridian that's in the sky, and then they burn out one by one based on the fact that they have a certain amount of plasma energy in them, and they're eventually going to diffuse. And so they diffuse at the same pulse over the city, and it looks intelligent, right? Could be an armada of UFOs, I don't know, but that's my current belief of that particular thing. I think if you had real UFOs, for instance, and not these UAPs that only fly over the ocean in front of Top Gun fighters, because they're testing the Top Gun fighters to see how they're going to respond, but also over other military installations. If it's only over those two things, it's a military vehicle. I'm just telling you. They're keeping it close to home for recovery purposes. Real UFO? Instead of the one in a million in New Mexico, the 47, and the ones up in Puget Sound. Puget Sound's also wild, man. I didn't know about the Puget Sound one until I did my Men in Black episode, which if you're interested in that one and all the details, go watch it. But wouldn't a UFO fly through Los Angeles? Wouldn't it fly around the skyscrapers in Dubai, the Eiffel Tower in France, right? They never do. They never fly over anything that's populated. There was a weird flying wing thing, I think, over Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that was photographed by one woman, and then a 35 millimeter shot, technically digital, from one other location, but it was a still from one location and a movie from another location. It disappears in the clouds. And her husband's standing right next to her, never thinks to get out his phone. The neighbors apparently weren't present at the time. No one else in the town saw it. No one else got their phones out. But the second we have a flying vehicle that is filmed by 100 people, and we can stitch it all together from all these 100 different cameras, we got something real. 100% in the modern day age. Why would these vehicles be more in the past than in the future? Well, it's probably for observable reasons. Right? You don't want to be caught looking at the population. This is a sociological experiment, our plane of existence, whether it's God creating this experiment or aliens creating some disc where it's just they're putting species in and seeing how it goes, or other human beings doing this whole thing with other human beings just to see how primitive man develops, right? If they introduce themselves, they screw up the experiment because we know we're all of a sudden in an experiment. Now, I did want to mention an interesting thing that I saw. I don't know if I mentioned the last episode or not with the buried history, but there was a new theory I heard, absolutely non-confirmable whatsoever, meaning this could just be pure fiction. It was very interesting. It was that there's something called the Black Pyramid in northern Alaska. And apparently, the story is ingenious, man. It should be like some show on TV if this isn't real. But when we started detonating nuclear bombs, because we were creating giant EMP waves, well, actually, there's probably a technical problem with this being even true in this realm. But every time a bomb went off, this region in Alaska emitted this weird frequency. Like it's reverberating off of a giant crystal. It's for this they didn't say crystal, but it's like that, right? And so they went to that area, which is obviously very difficult to get to in the story. They dug down like 150 feet, and they find this massive black pyramid down there, which then we start excavating. Sounds like Stephen King's Tommyknockers, right? And they found this pyramid. Now, I don't know why they say it's black. It could be dirt. Could be, was it basalt rock? Was some other unobtainium? I don't know. But they said that it emitted a frequency that subverted consciousness on this planet. Now, the idea is if it's buried 150 feet down inside soil, then EMP waves getting to it's going to be really difficult because it's going to get absorbed by all the natural insulation. Remember, concrete itself will absorb virtually all EMP waves, and lead most definitely. That's why they build nuclear power plants out of cement, because it just has a natural chaotic structure that will absorb fleeing electrons. So, it getting a resonance from an atomic bomb, it's probably buried too deep to actually have that happen. But I think the megahertz, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, it's something like 425 hertz was like 25 to 30 was this magical hertz rating to make music create love and beauty, and that feeling you hear when you hear music from the 70s and 80s. It's just a feeling that you get. You may not even like the song, but you're like, well, okay, yeah, that's okay. Like, I don't like Take On Me personally, but can't say it makes me feel bad, right? And then you get to the 90s and you get the super trance electronic music, Nine Inch Nails. You get Terminator X making all the scratches out of like alarm systems going off. And all of a sudden we're rah, right? So we're ready for gang wars and destroying the world, right? And that's about 450 that it starts to subvert consciousness. Why does the higher frequency do damage to us, and why is a slightly lower frequency resonate with us? Well, there must be something about the human skull, the human composition in a sacred geometry way that 425 to 430, somewhere in there, resonates with our DNA and turns on probably your third eye, your pineal gland, to get a higher level of information out of the universe, hence what it's made out of, which is love, right? That's the true substrate of our consciousness, is this beautiful love feeling. Now, we have ethereal mass energy that we're made out of as well, but that's just, who cares about that crap? But you can't mess with that and screw up your connection with your soul, of course. But 450, you get to a point where it starts to overwhelm the mind with basically white noise. That's all you need to subvert the consciousness of a person, is to drone them out. Why do we call it trance music? It is so overwhelming your circuitry in your brain for audio input that as it's trying to metabolize the trance music, you're getting put in a trance. It's just that simple. But I thought that was really interesting, the story that popped up. And of course, it's, what was it? It was Blink 182's lead singer says that he knew, and this is third person, even from that guy's claim, that he knows a military guy that said this is all true. Very funny, very interesting, right? Where will we go from here? Where will the military go from here? How long have they been there? Because it's, again, my friend Sid Mead, he kept getting approached by this one guy over the course of his life that kept talking about anti-gravity. And like I said before, it's one of these things of you want someone famous to pay attention to you. And so if you're just going to say, oh, I fed my cat today, I got a new car, how do you like this t-shirt? How about these shoes? How about that movie? Okay, whatever. You're going to have small talk, and it's not going to be that interesting. But if you walked in and said, man, I work in the military at the top level. I've been working 30 years on anti-gravity technology. And we got it. That's what he told him several times. We got it, baby. And Sid's immediate response, he said in the last conversation with this guy, which I have no idea what date this was. I tend to think it was the 21st century. But he said that, spinning mercury, which was in the first Iron Man, I think, in the lobby or whatever it was, is an amazing real thing, because you actually have a liquid metal that is, you can actually spin and give it its own velocity, and then you can supercharge it with electricity. And so you're building basically a liquid coil, which is just scary powerful, right? Because coils already metabolize up the vector of electrons. And, most of you understand drafting in a car race, right? So you're in NASCAR or you're in F1, you get behind the car in front of you, they're kicking out all the wind in your way so you can get in his draft and get on him real quick. So imagine a bunch of electrons drafting each other. And the metal itself is moving stuff out of the way. So you start to coil up massive amounts of energy, and then as long as you know how to manipulate it to create gravity wells, you got it. And I don't think it's probably as brilliant as you think, right? As long as you can create a pole that goes from a North Pole to a South Pole, or vice versa, you're going to move everything out of the way. The faster and more dense that you move that pole, the ethereal pressures that are keeping you pushed down are going to be out of the way. And this vehicle is going to be able to go wherever it wants. And the more you want to go up, the more you make the pole strong. The more you want to come back down, you let it be more permeable. But be very careful, because you could go crashing into the ground really bad. So Sid says, oh yeah, I know about your Mercury spinning engines. And he says, oh man, we're way past that, because we abandoned that a long time ago. Now, he didn't say what the alternative was, or if he did, he didn't say in a way that Sid could remember enough to tell me, which wouldn't normally be the case because Sid understood everything. So we think about these vehicles out there. The interesting thing about the Tic Tac was how small it was, and it was able to hold itself up, no wings, and it's moving very quickly, apparently, according to these Top Gun pilots. And I have no problem believing that they're chasing their own vehicle and just testing maneuverability. Like, hey, if this was a bad guy, how could the latest and greatest vehicles that we fly today, 35s to 22s to maybe a Hornet, how well could they do against it? It's an exercise. Plus, it looks like a Tic Tac. It doesn't look like a Transformer. And so you're not terrified of the thing. It doesn't have any visible weaponry on it. It's just an object you're chasing. So we have, obviously, people, we're all over the map because we don't know what the truth is, right? So is there a space station up there that is being held up by some vehicle because they don't actually have a ball we're going around? Or is it a ball? Is there some other type of pressure system up there that holds stuff in the sky and whatever, but they're able to go places that we can't go without anti-gravity easily, let's just say? Don't know. It would mean that they have mastered a tremendous amount of tech, since we apparently got help from looking at other people's inventions, other beings' inventions. And I think about the Tic Tac and the gimbal. Here's what's interesting about it. It was pretty uneventful, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't, I don't remember, but I don't remember it just utterly vanishing, although the Area 51 sighting was definitely a vehicle that damn near just disappeared when it took off. So if they're still at this fundamental level, not to discount the amazing technical accomplishments to create these little vehicles that have the speed and the maneuverability that they have, right? The gimbal was the one that was really, controlling its attitude and its positioning in 3D space. It sure looks like we're kind of at square one when it comes to the implementation of the technology. Now, someone could say, oh, this is just a little wing off to the side where these completely secret organizations have bled a little bit of the technology down to the actual skunkworks military, and they're able to create a little bit with it. But we're not giving them everything because, it's like that Twilight Zone episode, which I believe is one of the season 4 episodes, where the gentleman stumbles into a town. It has Scotty from Star Trek, and it's pretty cool. But he stumbles into a town. He's kind of a dick. And he wants to get some gas, and he wants to stay in a hotel. He at least wants to get some food. They don't want him to stay. And he's got this dog with him, one of those sheep dogs, right? And it jumps out of his car and runs over towards this girl and starts barking at him. And she's freaked out. And he's trying to get his dog to come back, and the little girl takes this little radio-looking thing and pulls this doodad off of the wire and points it at the dog. And boom, the dog's gone. And he sees it, and he's like, what'd you do to my dog? And he grabs her, and what'd you do to my dog? Bring my dog back, And she's like, get away from me. And she runs inside, and then Scotty comes out, her dad. And he's like, can I help you out? He's like, yeah, your kid, did something to my dog with this device. Oh, what? What did she have? What was this thing? And he was like, it must have been her radio. I'm sure your dog's around here somewhere. So Scotty walks around the corner. He tells the other guy to walk around the other side. Scotty brings out the same little thing and then zaps it. And the dog shows back up. And he's like, I got your dog right here. But the dude won't leave the town. He gets himself in trouble. And they find out that this town had some genius that came through a long time ago and gave them a machine that had all this replicator technology, and they were holding all this technology in the town because they deemed that it was not ready for the rest of the world. In fact, I think the old man that invented it made him do that, right? And so he said, look, we can't give this to the whole world. And by the way, you got to stay here now because you saw it. He's like, man, I'm not staying here. And he tries to get away, and it doesn't work. There's obviously lots of twists at the end because it's a Twilight Zone. But there's that whole issue of they're trying to keep us down. Electricity can't be free. Energy availability and population explosion are just absolutely glued together. But here's where the rub is. That's really strange. The alien invasion story, I think, is a fairly brilliant idea. And I think that the only reason why it can't be done would be that like I've said, I've done an episode on just nothing but the invasion and the logistics of what the invasion would be like if you want to look it up, right? Go to deepthoughtsradio.com. So they may have done the calculation as well and just simply said, look, this is going to be too risky. I mean, we can't do the Independence Day ship the size of a city hanging over, New York City. We just don't have, there's no place to build such a thing. That's way beyond what we have the ability to suspend in the air. What we have available, we don't want to show them just in case there's any logistical issues. Maybe the engines aren't as bulletproof as all the stuff that we've spent 100 years developing, like the turbine. So maybe it's toxic. Maybe it just has all kinds of issues. They don't want to admit it because then that would be like lack of power realization. And again, we're sitting here letting the governments of the world, run by 8,500 people, take away all of our rights, destroy all of our health, and we're just sitting here watching, right? Remember, they plan every day to do what they do to us. We don't plan shit. The only thing we've done in the last probably 5 years is, use social media to communicate with each other what we discover. But that's not planning. A bunch of truckers doing stuff together, that's planning. Look at the effect of that one little dinky tiny plan, that dinky gesture, which put people in jail. That's planning. That's a tiny sliver of what planning will do. And so, I don't know, maybe planning would be a good idea, right? But it sure seems like they tanked the idea. It seems like they tanked the idea. They did not leave a morsel of anything for the imagination in this first hearing. And I think it's just very interesting because the body language, again, the the evasiveness, I should say, of the couple individuals answering questions and giving those cocky ass questions. What's really interesting about it, I know you've seen it and probably no one's ever mentioned it, is when you find these pricks who get this Q clearance. It's called Queen's clearance. That's how you get into Area 51. They just immediately ascend to this hubris of, wow, I got picked. I got picked out of the entire world, and they falsely claim to their own brain that it's because they're special. Oh, they're special, all right. They're special morons that will sell out their own kind, right? They're special people that live in compartments and like it. They're special people that can't think for themselves, and they've already been preconditioned. If you have any family members that have ever gotten into intelligence agencies in the last 20 years, man, they put you in psychological tests forever. They ask you questions to make sure you believe every single official story in the book. I had a girlfriend 7 years ago, and her niece was getting into one of those agencies, right? And she sat there so proudly telling everybody at the Thanksgiving table, and her father was a Top Gun pilot, and honey, what did they tell you? Oh, Osama bin Laden definitely did the thing and to do that, and she's so proud she's regurgitating complete and utter bullshit. And they're just patting her on the back verbally the entire dinner. And so this kid is so galvanized to believe horse shit her whole fucking life. I pray she never wakes up. Because if she did, her brain's just going to go ba-boom. Her head's going to explode like scanners. But let's take one step back. What was the purpose of the alien invasion? What was the purpose of it? The fake one. NWO, right? To forge the NWO. What's happening right now in the world? Oh, right. The NWO's happening right now in front of our fucking faces, and we're too caught up in what's on fucking TV to give a shit about anything. Mike Myers came out with a new funny, it's like Panteva something, Panteveritz. It's funny as shit, man. It's got the same production quality as Austin Powers. I think it's like 7 or 8 episodes. It's on Netflix, which I know most of you don't subscribe to because of the inherent problems with that service. But he talks about, at one point, I won't spoil the whole thing for you because it's unspoilable. It's got so many surprises in its crates. Some of his best work, man. Unfortunately, he kind of represents our side just a little bit, but mostly their side. He's always making fun of us kind of people. That's how you get these shows financed. That's how it fucking works, man. Hey, I'll help you with all this conspiracy people. I'll do a hit piece inside a comedy piece if you give me money. Yes, Mr. Myers. Don't you feel so good? You're part of that group. See you later. So, at the end, though, there's a big truth. This won't ruin anything for you, trust me. One of the guys says, look, he goes, we're not messing up the world for you. You're messing up the world for you. You're getting the country you deserve. You're getting the country that you've allowed to happen. Walking around in fucking malls and worried about how much bling you got on you, whether or not you got a fancy car or a fucking boat or a golf cart to drive around your neighborhood in. You weren't paying attention. What was important, you didn't pay attention to. And what you didn't pay attention to was important. Totally right at the very end. Totally freaking right. But that's what we've done. Now, we've all guilty of this shit. I'm not trying to be holier than thou, of course, right? Once you wake up, you put some skin in the game, maybe make a show on YouTube, maybe make a podcast, maybe talk to people, maybe go watch those ballot boxes during a vote and put a camera on somebody after midnight. Who the fuck are you? Why you got 5 ballots? Get their license plate, get their face. Take care of business, right? They don't need the fake invasion anymore. They got a much more insidious, deadly plan. Because after the alien invasion, unless they attack us and kill millions and millions and tens of millions, they want to get rid of billions, people. Their current plan is going to get rid of billions. And this is we only just endured stage 1. If we don't change shit, if we don't start getting angry and do things. I don't say you have to do anything physical, but maybe everyone's such a pussy about that. I'm not saying, well, hey, it just depends, man. It just depends. Don't try to come to my doorstep and give me anything. All right, you can talk to me all the fuck you want. I don't have to open the door. You try to go in my door. Yeah, we're gonna have a little coming to God moment, right? But we can't just wait for everything to come to us to the most critical point. If we outwit them by thinking, why are we always celebrating 45 and his little team? Oh, he's going to save the whole world. It's like, well, why would it? Let's say he's totally legit and this whole movement, the 17 movement's all legit. Why would you wait for them to be the only ones doing it? Are you completely incapable of doing anything? Yeah. I'm preaching to the choir, I understand. You guys are doing things. But as you pass this philosophy down to other people, the alien invasion just got its balloon popped because they don't need it anymore. And then why not? Because I think there's a ton of people in the world right now that are going, hey, I'm just going to be a dick in front of everybody. Fucking Bill Gates doesn't give 2 fucks about what you think about that guy. He's buying up all this land, man. He's going to be sitting pretty because no one's got the balls to arrest the motherfucker, right? Fauci don't give a shit, right? He don't give a shit, dude. And so they have in their brain a timetable when everyone starts disappearing. And whoever's left is going to sweep us up, right? Because we're not doing anything. So alien invasion, well, fuck, that was always going to be a huge pain in the ass. So now we can take all that technology and hide it until everybody else is gone. And then we don't ride horse and buggy anymore. We just fly whatever mountaintop we want to go to. We got these anti-gravity vehicles. Shit, if space really exists, and moon, like, we'll just go up there and chill out. We'll go to Mars, whatever, fuck, whatever. It's 100% us, right? Was watching that because I'm at the lounge where they have Netflix. I don't have it at home, but was it that Love, Robots, and Death? I think that's the series by Neil Blomkamp's group, which is like visually some of the most stunning CG you've ever seen in your life. It makes Hollywood lay down and take a nap. The first episode, I think, of season 3, just as a complete side note, is a bunch of Spanish conquistadors finding this enchanted Indian woman in a lake. Make sure you watch that one. That's like unbelievable cinematography and composition and CG. I mean, it's just mind-blowing, right? But there's one at the very end. I'm not sure how it's sorted. Like when you go from season 2 and you scroll up into season 3, this Conquistador one is the first one. At the very end are their little robots. There's 3 robots that are like reoccurring characters, and they're stuck in the post-apocalyptic human world as robots, looking at all the remains of humans and trying to piece it all together with really screwed up logic. And there's a huge virtue signaling thing at the very end about how bad humans were and all this other stuff. But to their credit, they talked about how the peasant, us, right? Not the 8,500 Satanists running the planet, but the people split up into factions, and some people like ended up running little, farms and stuff like communes, right? That's the word I'm trying to search for, right? So they ended up killing each other out of starvation, all this other stuff, because obviously we messed up the entire world for making any food, and we started eating deers first, then we started eating humans, and then they broke into in this comedy series, they broke into a vault where the elite went, and they also died because everything they set up got blown out by a fungus, and so you see them eating each other too. And then they find out that the super mega billionaire trillionaire people went to Mars. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but whatever. You're not watching it for the story. You're watching it for the CG and the funny comedy that brings us all out. And so there's a twist at the end. I won't ruin for you, but it seems like, if you have these idiots who have enough power to destroy the world, somehow are going to be brilliant enough to maintain it after we're gone? What logic problem is that, right? There's no logic to that whatsoever. The God-fearing person, or the common law-fearing person, the person that believes in do no harm, is the only hope that we have, right? One of the first episodes I ever did on aliens back in season 1 was called The Alien Promise. And it's good to remember the Alien Promise. I said it to a friend of mine. I watched his face go, oh, yeah, you're right, right? And it's about the fact that there's a lot of people that believe that Christ is coming back to save us. And as the world goes to shit, they really want that to happen. Believe me, I'm there. I want him to come back too, right? Make it happen. But the secondary atheist side of that game is the alien promise. I want aliens to come down here, like it said in the Babylonian scripture, supposedly from cuneiform tablets, and I want them to get rid of these scumbags and reset us and then fuck off to some other place. That's the alien promise. Cures to things, methods of running our world, maybe get a little bit of our history back. The Tartarians, who the hell were they, you know? So, those are my thoughts on this subject. Hopefully this was entertaining. It's definitely something that's budding. If there's any more hearings or any more epiphanies about this stuff, really interested in your comments, we'll definitely cover it again. Because I think, you know, if I'm interested, like, what would a second hearing be about? Really, right? Like, what's going to be about? Don't know. Anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. A bunch of the feeds for the last probably 150 videos are all going over to Rumble. So please get over to Rumble and subscribe, because that's going to be our future. We have just free reign to do whatever the hell we want over there. I know it's tough to tear yourself away from what you're accustomed to. I am on Truth Social now as Deep Thoughts Radio. The interesting thing about that feed over there is none of you guys seem to be over there. Like a couple of you went over. I know a lot of people waiting to get on there. Forget the whole who created it thing. The nice thing is we can post generally whatever we want. Yeah, you can't post crazy shit like snuff videos or some stupid thing, but what we want to share with each other is perfectly suited for that. It'd be nice to build up a nice population over there, get off of Farcebook. I would love to shut down all my Facebook accounts. Love to, but I can't, because we have a great following over there with 760 of you. Probably half of you are real people, because the other ones are fake accounts spying on us. But we'll get over to Truth, and at least we'll have a place that runs really quick. You can get it on the web now. It's cool. But if you haven't been to the website, go there, because it has audio, video, social media. It has all new remastered season 1. A store with a couple new shirts. I did one I didn't advertise, which is a pyramid. It says Power Plant on it. I dig that. But we also have a couple ways to donate to the show. I appreciate all of you hanging on during this weird shift for me, because I have to drag this a whole nother city over to set up and record nowadays, because I don't live in Huntington Beach for the time being. But again, you guys make it happen. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.